The conference room fell silent as I slid the signed contract across the mahogany table. $23 billion. The Tesla Gigafactory's entire energy supply for the next decade, now flowing through my company's grid. Marcus Wilson, their head of operations, shook my weathered hand with both of his. Mr. Hartwell, this changes everything for us. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see my brother Garrett's red Tesla gleaming in the parking lot below. The same car he'd spent last Sunday bragging about over dinner, explaining to me how I should modernize and catch up with technology. I pressed my palm against the cool glass and smiled. Some secrets are worth keeping. My name is Eugene Hartwell, and I'm 71 years old. What you just heard happened 3 weeks ago, but to understand why it matters, I need to take you back to where this story really begins. The smell of burnt coffee and my brother's cologne hit me the moment I walked into Murphy's diner. Garrett was already there, drumming his manicured fingers against the checkered tablecloth, checking his phone for the third time since I'd spotted him through the window. At 58, he still had that restless energy that made him successful in commercial real estate. Always moving, always calculating, always performing. Eugene! He stood up, arms spread wide like he was greeting a long-lost friend instead of the brother he'd seen just 2 weeks ago. You look tired, man. You been sleeping? I slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from him, my knees protesting the movement. Sleep's overrated at my age. That's what I'm talking about. Garrett's voice carried that familiar note of concern that wasn't really concern, more like an opportunity to solve someone else's problems. You're working too hard at that little energy company of yours. When was the last time you took a real vacation? Little energy company. I bit the inside of my cheek and picked up the menu I'd memorized 20 years. Ego. I get by. The waitress, Betty, been here since the Nixon administration, shuffled over with the coffee pot. The usual, Eugene. Please. I watched her pour the dark liquid, steam rising between us like a barrier. Garrett ordered some complicated egg white thing that probably cost more than Betty made in tips all morning. So, Garrett said, leaning forward with that grin that meant he had news to share. I've got something to show you after breakfast. Through the diner's greasy window, I could see it parked at the curb, sleek, red, silent. A Tesla Model S, the kind that cost more than most people's annual salary. Garrett had positioned it perfectly under the streetlight, like a piece of art on display. New car? I asked, though we both knew I'd already seen it. Not just a car, Eugene, it's the future. He pulled out his phone, swiping through photos. 0 emissions, 405 horsepower, autopilot that's basically artificial intelligence. Look at this interior, real leather, premium, sound system. I nodded at the appropriate moments while Garrett scrolled through specifications I could have recited from memory. Tesla had been on my radar for months, not as a consumer, but as someone who understood exactly how much electricity those beautiful machines demanded. Every charging station, every gigafactory, every ambitious expansion Elon Musk announced in his theatrical presentations. The best part, Garrett continued, is the savings. No more gas stations, no more oil changes. It's pure efficiency. Betty returned with our plates. My scrambled eggs looked exactly like they had every Tuesday morning for the past 5 years. Simple, reliable, unpretentious. Garrett's egg whites came arranged in some artistic swirl with organic spinach that probably traveled further than most people's vacation destinations. Must have cost a fortune, I said, cutting into my toast. Well, yeah, but it's an investment. Think about it. I'm saving money every day I don't buy gas. Plus, the resale value on these things is incredible. He took a bite, then continued talking through the food. And honestly, the respect you get driving one of these, it's like wearing a suit that says you care about the environment and you've got the means to do something about it. I watched my brother's face as he talked, the slight flush of excitement, the way his eyes lit up when he described the car's acceleration. This was Garrett's pattern. Acquire something impressive, then spend weeks, explaining why everyone else should want it too. The Rolex, the downtown condo, the European vacation photographs strategically shared on social media. You should test drive one, he said, pointing his fork at me. Seriously, I bet I could get you a deal through my Tesla contact. It might be exactly what you need to freshen up your image. My image? Come on, Eugene. You're still driving that beat Ford pickup that looks like it survived the Reagan administration. People notice these things, especially in business. I set down my coffee cup carefully. My truck runs fine. That's not the point. Garrett's voice took on that patient tone he used when explaining obvious things to slow people. It's about perception. You meet with clients, right? Suppliers? What does it say when you pull up in a vehicle that's older than some of your employees? The irony sat in my throat like a stone. 3 days ago, I'd driven that same Ford pickup to a meeting with the regional power grid coordinator, where we'd discussed a potential contract that would make Garrett's Tesla payment look like pocket change. But Garrett didn't know about that meeting. He didn't know about a lot of things. Maybe you're right, I said. I know I'm right. He grinned and pulled out his phone again. Let me show you the app. I can control everything remotely. Climate, charging, even summon the car to come pick me up. Watch this. Through the window, I watched the red Tesla silently glide backward, out of its parking space, then slide smoothly into an open spot closer to the diner. Garrett's face glowed with the satisfaction of a magician who'd just pulled off his best trick. Impressive, I admitted. Right? It's like living in the future. He scrolled to another screen. And the charging network keeps expanding. Tesla's building these massive supercharger stations everywhere. They're even planning new gigafactories to keep up with demand. I nodded, thinking about the thick folder locked. In my office safe. Construction permits, environmental impact reports, electrical grid capacity studies. Information that Garrett, despite all his research into Tesla ownership, had never bothered to investigate. The only downside, he continued, is the energy costs are going up. My electric bill nearly doubled last month, but hey, that's progress, right? Clean energy costs more, but it's worth it for the planet. Absolutely, I said, finishing my eggs. Progress always comes with a price. Garrett paid the check, insisted on it like always, and we walked outside. The morning sun caught the Tesla's paint job, making it gleam like fresh blood. He unlocked it with a theatrical flourish, and the door handles emerged from their hidden positions. Want to take a ride? He asked. Just around the block? I looked at the car, really looked at it. Beautiful engineering, revolutionary technology, a symbol of everything the modern world promised. Then I looked at my brother, practically vibrating with pride and excitement, waiting for my approval. Maybe next time, I said. I've got a meeting. Business or pleasure? I smiled and started walking toward my truck. Little bit of both. As I drove away, I caught Garrett in my rearview mirror, standing beside his Tesla, probably already planning who else he could show it to. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Tesla's energy procurement team confirmed for Thursday 2 p.m. All documents ready for your review. I turned the radio up and headed back to my little energy company, where $23 billion worth of contracts were waiting for my signature. The offices of Hartwell Energy Solutions occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town, the kind of building that real estate agents politely called authentic, and my brother would have described as desperately needing renovation. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hand gripping the worn banister that had supported thousands of workers over the decades. The elevator had been broken for 6 months, and I kept meaning to fix it, but somehow the daily climb had become part of my routine. Morning, Mr. H. Lydia looked up from her desk, already halfway through what I knew was her 2nd cup of coffee. At 34, she'd been my assistant for 8 years, ever since her divorce left her needing a job that offered flexibility for her 2 kids. How was breakfast with your brother? Educational, I said, hanging my jacket on the hook behind my door. Any messages? Tesla called twice. Mr. Reeves from Pacific Grid wants you to call him back before noon. And... She hesitated, holding up a pink message slip. Your nephew Austin called. Says it's important. Austin. Garrett's oldest boy, 26 years old with an MBA and enough confidence to fill a football stadium. I took the message and glanced at the number, his direct line at Morrison & Associates, the consulting firm where he'd landed straight out of business school. Did he say what it was about? Something about a business opportunity. He sounded excited. I nodded and walked into my office, closing the door behind me. The space hadn't changed much in 15 years. Same metal desk, same filing cabinets, same view of the shipping yard where 18-wheelers loaded and unloaded cargo around the clock. The only additions were the framed photographs on my bookshelf, my late wife Sarah at our anniversary dinner, my daughter Michelle's, graduation from medical school, and a picture of the crew that built our first solar installation back in 2009. The Tesla folder sat exactly where I'd left it, thick with technical specifications and financial projections. I opened it and spread the documents across my desk. Power consumption analyses, grid integration studies, environmental impact assessments, numbers that told a story Garrett would never think to read. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hartwell. Energy. Uncle Eugene, it's Austin. Austin. I leaned back in my chair. Lydia said you called. Yeah, listen, I've got something huge I want to run by you. Are you free for lunch today? Depends on what huge means. I could hear him moving around, probably pacing. Austin inherited his father's restless energy but channeled it differently, less showmanship, more calculation. I've been working on a market analysis for clean energy investments, and I came across some interesting information about Tesla's expansion plans. My hand tightened around the phone. What kind of information? They're planning a massive new gigafactory on the East Coast. The energy requirements are going to be insane. We're talking about contracts worth billions. I think there might be an opportunity for you to get in on the ground floor. I stared at the papers spread across my desk, each page representing months of careful negotiation and strategic positioning. What makes you think I'd be interested? Come on, Uncle Eugene. You've been in the energy business for what, 30 years? This is the kind of deal that could transform your entire operation, take you from local supplier to major player overnight. Local supplier. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I picked up a pen and started drawing circles on my notepad, small ones at first, then larger, overlapping rings. I appreciate the thought, Austin, but just hear me out, okay? I've done the research. Tesla's energy. Procurement process is incredibly competitive, but there are ways to position yourself as an attractive partner. It's all about presentation, strategic partnerships, maybe bringing in some investors with deeper pockets. Through my window, I watched a delivery truck navigate the narrow alley behind our building. The driver, Carlos, I'd known him for years, reversed carefully between two dumpsters, taking his time despite the schedule pressure. Precise, experienced, invisible to most people who never thought about how their world stayed stocked and functioning. Have you talked to your father about this? I asked. Not yet. I wanted to run it by you first, get your take on the technical side. Dad's great with real estate, but energy infrastructure is your wheelhouse. I set down my pen and looked at the Tesla logo printed at the top of every document. Clean lines, modern font, the kind of branding that suggested innovation and progress. When did you want to meet? How about Romano's? At 12:30? My treat. Romano's, the kind of restaurant where Austin felt comfortable, where business deals were discussed over $20 salads and imported water. Not my usual territory, but I'd been there before for client meetings that required a certain atmosphere. I'll be there, I said. Great. And Uncle Eugene, you might want to think about bringing some company materials, maybe a capabilities overview. This could be the conversation that changes everything. After he hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long moment. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder labeled Company Overview, a modest document that outlined our services, client list, and operational capacity. It was accurate but deliberately understated, the kind of presentation that suggested competence without ambition. I thought about the folder locked in my safe downstairs, the one containing documents Austin would never dream existed. Purchase agreements, grid integration contracts, regulatory approvals, the kind of paperwork that represented not opportunity, but accomplished fact. At 11:40, I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Lydia looked up from her computer. Lunch meeting, I said. I should be back by 2. Don't forget about the Tesla call at 2:30. I won't forget. The drive to Romano's took me through downtown, past the gleaming office towers where my brother worked his deals and my nephew crafted his analyses. I parked between a BMW and a Mercedes, my Ford pickup, looking exactly as out of place as Garrett had suggested it would. Austin was already seated at a corner table, laptop open, papers organized in neat stacks. He'd inherited the family height, but not the restlessness. When Austin focused on something, he became absolutely still, like a predator calculating the perfect moment to strike. "Uncle Eugene!" He stood up, extending his hand. "Thanks for coming." I sat down across from him, noting the spread of documents on the table: market research, Tesla financial reports, energy sector analyses. The kind of homework that impressed professors and entry-level supervisors. "So," I said, "tell me about this opportunity." Austin's eyes lit up. "Okay, here's the situation. Tesla's growth trajectory is unsustainable with their current energy partnerships. They need suppliers who can scale quickly, handle massive power loads, and provide the kind of reliability that keeps production lines running 24/7. He slid a chart across the table showing projected energy consumption for Tesla's planned facilities. The numbers were staggering: enough electricity to power a small city, delivered with zero tolerance for interruption. "The key," Austin continued, "is positioning yourself as more than just a commodity supplier. Tesla values innovation, environmental responsibility, forward-thinking partnerships. They want suppliers who share their vision." I nodded, studying the chart. "And you think my company fits that profile?" "With the right presentation, absolutely. You've got decades of experience, a solid reputation, existing relationships with the regional grid operators. What you need is scale and visibility." "Scale." "Exactly. The traditional approach would be to slowly build capacity over years, maybe decades. But this Tesla opportunity represents a shortcut, a chance to leap directly to the major leagues." The waiter appeared, and we ordered. Austin got some complicated salad with grilled salmon. I asked for a hamburger. When we were alone again, Austin pulled out another document. "I've drafted a preliminary proposal," he said, sliding the papers toward me. "Obviously, this is just a starting point, but it outlines how Hartwell Energy could position itself as Tesla's primary East Coast power supplier." I picked up the proposal and scanned the executive summary. Bold projections, aggressive timelines, investment requirements that would strain our resources to the breaking point. It was the plan that looked impressive in PowerPoint presentations and destroyed family businesses in reality. "This is very thorough," I said. "Thanks. I know it's ambitious, but that's what it takes to compete at this level. Half measures won't get Tesla's attention." I set the proposal down and looked at my nephew's eager face. 26 years old, MBA from a respected program, complete confidence in his ability to see opportunities that others had missed. The same expression I'd seen on his father's face countless times over the years. "Austin," I said carefully, "what makes you think Tesla hasn't already secured their energy partnerships for this new facility?" "Because the announcement just came out last month. The RFP process probably hasn't even started yet. We'd be getting in ahead of the curve." "And you've verified this how?" "Industry contacts, trade publications, Tesla's own investor relations materials. This is solid intelligence, Uncle Eugene." I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip, buying time to think. The irony was almost painful. Austin had done excellent research on publicly available information while remaining completely unaware of the private negotiations that had already concluded. I said, "Your father mentioned something interesting this morning about Tesla's charging network expansion." "Right? It's incredible how fast they're growing. Dad's always been smart about spotting trends early." "Has he considered investing in Tesla stock?" "Are you kidding? He bought in 2 years ago, made a fortune already." Austin grinned. "Though between you and me, I think he's more excited about the status symbol than the investment returns." Our food arrived, and Austin continued talking about market projections and strategic positioning while I ate my hamburger and watched him wave his fork for emphasis. He had his father's enthusiasm, but better focus. His grandfather's analytical mind, but more sophistication. In different circumstances, I might have been impressed. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down and saw it was from my assistant. Tesla moved the call up to 2. "Papers are ready for signature." I looked at Austin, still talking about partnership opportunities and competitive advantages. completely absorbed in his vision of how the world should work. In 15 minutes, I would drive back to my little energy company and sign contracts that would make his proposal irrelevant, but he didn't need to know that yet. I checked my watch as I walked back through the parking lot. 1:50. Austin was still inside Romano's, probably organizing his papers and planning his next strategic move, unaware that his uncle had just excused himself to finalize the deal he thought he was pitching. The drive back to the warehouse took 8 minutes. I pulled into my usual spot next to the loading dock, where Tommy Valdez was directing a crew unloading solar panels from a semi-trailer. He waved, and I waved back, the kind of wordless communication that comes from years of shared work. Tommy had been with us since the beginning, back when Hartwell Energy was just me, a rented truck, and a determination to prove that renewable energy could work in the real world. "Mr. H," Lydia called out as I walked past her desk, "Tesla's online too. They said something about moving the timeline up." I closed my office door and picked up the phone. "Eugene Hartwell. Mr. Hartwell, this is Patricia Chen from Tesla's Energy Procurement Division. I hope you don't mind, but we need to accelerate our schedule." "Not at all. What's the situation?" "Our board meeting got moved to tomorrow morning, and we want to have all major contracts finalized before then. Can you be here by 3:30 instead of tomorrow afternoon?" I looked at the clock on my wall, an old industrial timepiece that had come with the building. 2:15. That's cutting it close. I understand, but frankly, your proposal is exactly what we've been looking for. The board is going to love the numbers, especially the grid stability guarantees and the renewable energy integration. We're prepared to move forward immediately if you are. The renewable energy integration. That had been the key differentiator, the element that separated serious suppliers from opportunistic bidders. While companies like Austin thought he was discovering focused on scale and presentation, Tesla's real priority was sustainable infrastructure, power. That didn't just meet their needs, but aligned with their environmental mission. "I'll be there," I said. "Excellent. Conference room C, 15th floor. Security will have your name at the front desk." After she hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a moment. 15 years of careful planning, strategic positioning, and gradual expansion had led to this moment. Not the dramatic leap Austin imagined, but the methodical progression from local installer to regional supplier to, if this afternoon went well, national energy partner. I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the leather portfolio that had belonged to my father. Inside were the final contract documents, each page reviewed by our attorneys, each specification verified by our engineering team. Unlike Austin's ambitious projections, these numbers represented proven capacity, tested systems, and relationships built over decades of reliable service. A knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." Lydia stepped inside, holding a manila envelope. "This just came by courier from Morrison & Associates, Austin's firm." I took the envelope and found a handwritten note paper clipped to a bound presentation. "Uncle Eugene, thanks for lunch. Here's the full proposal we discussed. I know you'll want time to review it carefully. Let's talk tomorrow about next steps. This could be the beginning of something incredible." Austin. The proposal was impressive. 47 pages of market analysis, financial projections, and strategic recommendations. Austin had clearly spent weeks researching Tesla's operations, studying their growth patterns, and crafting what he believed was a winning approach. The cover letter outlined an 18-month timeline for building the necessary infrastructure, securing investment partners, and positioning Hartwell Energy as a major player in the electric vehicle supply chain. It was exactly the kind of thinking that business schools taught and consulting firms sold. Bold, logical, thoroughly researched, and completely disconnected from the reality of how major contracts actually got negotiated and won. I flipped to the financial section and found Austin's estimates for Tesla's energy procurement budget. He was off by about 40%, not bad for publicly available data, but nowhere near the actual figures I'd been discussing with Tesla's team for the past 6 months. The real numbers were both larger and more complex, involving grid integration costs, renewable energy, certificates, and long-term price stability guarantees that never appeared in press releases or investor presentations. "Lydia," I called out, "can you get Tommy to cover the afternoon shift? I need to be out of the office for a few hours. Sure thing. Should I reschedule the 4 o'clock with Southwest Solar? No, that's next week. Today's clear after this Tesla meeting. I gathered my portfolio and headed for the door, then stopped. Austin's proposal sat on my desk, 47 pages of. I picked it up and slipped it into my briefcase, not because I needed it, but because somehow it felt wrong to leave it behind. The Tesla building rose 32 stories above downtown, all glass and steel and architectural confidence. I parked in the visitor garage and took the elevator to the 15th floor, where Patricia Chen was waiting in the lobby. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, extending her hand. Perfect timing. Was younger than I'd expected. Maybe 40, with the kind of focused energy that suggested she'd been working on electric vehicle infrastructure since before it was fashionable. We walked through corridors lined with photos of Tesla factories, charging stations, and engineering breakthroughs that had revolutionized an industry. "I have to say," she continued as we walked, "your approach to this partnership really impressed our team. Most suppliers focus on scale and cost efficiency. You understood that we need reliability and environmental alignment. Those aren't just talking points for us," I said. "They're how we've operated for 15 years. It shows. Your track record with grid integration is exactly what we need for this expansion." Conference Room C overlooked the city, with a view that stretched from the financial district to the industrial waterfront, where my warehouse sat among the loading docks and shipping containers. Patricia spread my contract documents across the polished table while I looked down at the world I'd been working in and working to change for most of my adult life. "Before we begin," she said, "I want you to know that this decision wasn't just about technical specifications or competitive pricing. Tesla believes in partnering with companies that share our vision for sustainable energy." I thought about Austin's proposal, still sitting in my briefcase. All those pages of strategic analysis, and he'd missed the most important factor in Tesla's decision-making process. It wasn't about discovering opportunities or leaping to the major leagues. It was about proving, year after year, that you could deliver on promises that other companies only made in PowerPoint presentations. "We've had our eye on Hartwell Energy for longer than you might think," Patricia continued. "Your work with the residential solar network, the grid stabilization project you completed last year, that's the kind of innovation Tesla needs in a primary energy partner." The phrase sent a small jolt through my chest. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that contracts and projections couldn't. "There is one element we'd like to add to the standard agreement," she said, pulling out an additional document. "Tesla's planning some major announcements about our East Coast expansion, and we'd prefer to keep the supplier relationships confidential until the public launch." "How long are we talking about?" 6 weeks, maybe 8, just until we're ready for the full media rollout." I nodded, thinking about Garrett's Tesla parked outside Romano's, about Austin's excitement over his discovered opportunity, about all the conversations I'd be having with family members who still thought of Hartwell Energy as a small operation struggling to stay relevant. Patricia opened her laptop and pulled up the final contract. "Any questions before we make this official?" I looked at the signature line, then out the window at my Ford pickup, barely visible in the visitor parking section far below. In about 10 minutes, my little energy company would become Tesla's primary power supplier for their entire East Coast operation. Garrett would keep bragging about his car, Austin would keep chasing opportunities he thought he'd discovered, and nobody would know that the foundation of Tesla's expansion was being built by the brother and uncle they kept trying to help modernize. "Just one question," I said, reaching for my pen. Patricia smiled. "What's that?" I looked up at her, thinking about all the secrets that made the modern world possible, all the invisible infrastructure that kept the lights on and the factories running and the electric cars charging. "When exactly does the confidentiality period end?" 6 weeks, Patricia said, checking her calendar. "The official announcement is scheduled for the first week of December. That gives us time to finalize the infrastructure details and coordinate with the media team." I signed my name on the signature line, Eugene T. Hartwell, and watched Patricia countersign with her electronic signature. $23 billion, committed with the stroke of a pen in a conference room 32 floors above the city. "Congratulations, Mr. Hartwell," she said, shaking my hand again. Tesla's excited about this partnership. So am I. The elevator ride down felt different than the trip up. Same, mirrored walls, same soft music, but now I was carrying contracts that would transform not just my company, but the entire regional power grid. When the doors opened in the lobby, I walked past the Tesla reception area where a massive screen displayed rotating images of their latest innovations, autonomous vehicles, solar roof installations, battery storage systems that promised to revolutionize how energy moved through modern society. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. A text from Austin. Hope you had time to review the proposal. Free for dinner tomorrow to discuss strategy? I typed back, let me think about it. The drive back to the warehouse took me through the afternoon rush hour, past office buildings where people like Austin were analyzing market opportunities that had already been seized, and strip malls where people like Garrett were making deals that felt important in the moment but would be forgotten by Christmas. I pulled into my parking space next to the loading dock, where Tommy was finishing up with the solar panel delivery. How'd it go, boss? He asked, securing the last panel on the storage rack. Well, I said, very well. Tommy had been with me long enough to read the tone in my voice. He wiped his hands on his work shirt and studied my face. Good news? The best. I looked at the panels stacked in neat rows, each one representing a small step toward the kind of energy independence that Tesla was building on a massive scale. Tommy, how would you feel about expanding our operations? Depends on what kind of expanding we're talking about. The kind that means hiring about 50 new people over the next 6 months. His eyebrows went up. 50, maybe more. We're going to need additional warehouse space, probably a second location. New equipment, new trucks, definitely some management positions. Tommy leaned against the loading dock rail, processing this information. He'd been with small operations his entire career, companies where everyone knew everyone, where decisions got made quickly, where you could see the direct impact of your work. The kind of growth I was describing would change everything. Big contract? He asked. Very big. Can you tell me who? I thought about Patricia's confidentiality requirements, about Austin's proposal still sitting in my briefcase, about Garrett's red Tesla, and all the assumptions my family made about my little energy company. Not yet, I said. But soon. Inside the office, Lydia was shutting down her computer for the day. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the question in her eyes. Everything good? She asked. Everything's excellent. Lydia, I need you to start putting together job descriptions for some new positions. Project managers, field supervisors, maybe an operations coordinator. How many positions? Start with 10. We'll probably need more. She opened her notepad and started writing. Any particular timeline? Very soon. I paused in my office doorway. And Lydia, this stays between us for now. Of course. I closed my office door and sat down at my desk, where Austin's proposal still lay open to the financial projections. His numbers were impressive in their own right, the kind of growth trajectory that would have excited investors and business development committees. But they were projections, possibilities, hopes dressed up in professional presentation format. The Tesla contracts, now safely filed in my desk drawer, were something entirely different. Guaranteed revenue streams, infrastructure development schedules, delivery requirements that would keep us busy for the next decade. Austin had been chasing an opportunity. I'd been building a solution. My phone rang. Garrett's name appeared on the caller ID. Eugene, he said, and I could hear road noise in the background. Quick question. You still do residential solar installations? Some. Depends on the size and location. I've got a client interested in a pretty big setup. Custom home, environmentally conscious, wants to go completely off-grid. Could be a nice project for you. I picked up my pen and started doodling on Austin's proposal. Small circles that gradually grew larger, overlapping in complex patterns. How big are we talking? 40-panel array, battery storage, the whole package. He's got the budget, just wants someone reliable. I'll need to do a site survey, check the electrical setup. Perfect. I told him you were good people. Just maybe not set up for the really massive commercial stuff yet. I drew another circle, this one encompassing all the others. What gave you that impression? Come on, Eugene. You do good work. But you're still operating out of that old warehouse, driving the same truck you've had for 10 years. There's nothing wrong with being a boutique operation. Through my office window, I could see Tommy loading the last of the solar panels into our storage area. Good equipment maintained, properly, ready for installation whenever customers needed them. The kind of reliable operation that Garrett had never learned to recognize. "Send me the client's information," I said. "I'll take a look." "Great. And hey, have you thought any more about that Tesla test drive? I'm telling you, once you experience that acceleration, you'll understand what you're missing." "I'll keep it in mind." After he hung up, I stared at Austin's proposal for a long moment, then closed it and slipped it back into the manila envelope. 47 pages of strategic thinking that had become obsolete before it was even printed. I thought about calling Austin, about explaining the situation, about letting him know that his opportunity had already been seized by the uncle he was trying to help. But Patricia's confidentiality agreement was clear, and besides, there was something valuable in letting Austin continue his research, continue his planning, continue believing that opportunities were there for people smart enough to spot them. In 6 weeks, when Tesla made their announcement, he'd understand how the energy industry actually worked, not through bold presentations and strategic leaps, but through years of patient relationship building and proven performance. I locked the Tesla contracts in my desk drawer and headed for the door. Lydia had already left, and the warehouse was quiet except for the distant hum of the electrical systems that kept our operation running. Tomorrow I'd start, making the calls that would transform this space into something Austin would never call a boutique operation. New employees, expanded facilities, equipment that could handle grid-scale installations. But tonight, I was still Eugene Hartwell, owner of a little energy company that his family thought needed help modernizing. My phone buzzed with another text as I reached my truck. This time it was from my daughter, Michelle. "Dad, Garrett mentioned you might want to upgrade your vehicle situation. I know a good Tesla dealer if you're interested." I typed back, "Thanks, sweetheart, I'll think about it." As I drove home through the evening traffic, I passed a Tesla charging station where 3 cars were plugged in for the night. Clean, quiet, efficient. The visible symbol of an energy transformation that most people experienced as consumers rather than infrastructure providers. In 6 weeks, when Tesla announced their East Coast expansion, those charging stations would multiply across the region, each one connected to a power grid that Hartwell Energy would be supplying. But first I had to get through 6 weeks of family dinners where Garrett would keep explaining why I needed to modernize, and Austin would keep developing strategies for opportunities that had already been captured. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. The house looked exactly the same as it had this morning. Modest, well-maintained, completely unremarkable. The garage sat my other vehicle, a sedan that Sarah had driven before she passed, still reliable after 8 years. Tomorrow, I could buy any car I wanted. A Tesla, if I felt like joining Garrett's club. A luxury pickup truck that would make better impressions on clients. Something that matched my company's new status as a major energy supplier. But tonight, I walked into my house the same way I had for 15 years, carrying secrets that would change everything and nobody would see coming. My landline was blinking with a voicemail. I pressed play while sorting through the day's mail. "Eugene, it's Austin. I just wanted to say thanks again for lunch, and I hope you'll seriously consider what we discussed. I know the proposal looks ambitious, but that's what it takes to compete at Tesla's level. Call me when you've had a chance to review everything. This could be the break you've been waiting for." I deleted the message and smiled. In 6 weeks, Austin would realize that his uncle hadn't been waiting for a break. He'd been building one. 6 weeks later, I was standing in our new conference room when Lydia knocked on the door frame. "Your brother's here," she said, "and he brought Austin." I looked out the window at the parking lot, where Garrett's red Tesla was parked next to Austin's BMW. They were both staring up at the building, specifically at the new sign that read Hartwell Energy Solutions in brushed steel letters across the expanded facade. "They look confused," Lydia added. "Send them up." The past 6 weeks had transformed everything. We'd leased the adjacent warehouse, hired 37 new employees, and installed equipment that could handle massive utility-scale installations. The old loading dock where Tommy used to unload solar panels by hand now accommodated articulated trucks carrying industrial transformers. Our fleet had grown from my Ford pickup and 2 work vans to include specialized haulers, crane trucks, and service vehicles. But the most dramatic change was sitting in my desk drawer. A printed copy of Tesla's press release, scheduled to go live in exactly 43 minutes. I heard footsteps on the stairs. We'd finally fixed the elevator, but some habits died hard. Garrett appeared first, slightly out of breath, followed by Austin carrying his laptop bag and looking like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Eugene," Garrett said, glancing around the reception area. "What the hell is going on here?" "Coffee?" I asked. "Lydia just made a fresh pot." "I don't want coffee. I want to know why there are 18-wheelers in your parking lot and why your building looks like it doubled in size." Austin was studying the framed certificates on the wall, electrical contractor licenses, grid interconnection approvals, environmental compliance certifications, documents that had been accumulating for years but were now displayed with newfound confidence. "Maybe we should sit down," I said, leading them into the conference room. The space was designed for meetings I'd never needed before. Presentations to utility executives, contract negotiations with major manufacturers. Austin's eyes went immediately to the wall-mounted displays showing real-time power grid data and delivery schedules. "Uncle Eugene," Austin said slowly, "what exactly does your company do now?" "We supply electricity," I said. "Large quantities of it to customers who need reliable power delivery." Garrett was looking out the window at the equipment yard, where workers in Hartwell Energy uniforms were assembling modular transformer units. "This is all new. Some of it, we've been expanding our capabilities." "Expanding?" Austin pulled out his laptop. "6 weeks ago, you were doing residential solar installations and small commercial projects." I sat down at the head of the conference table and checked my watch. 38 minutes until Tesla's announcement. "Austin, do you remember that proposal you sent me? The one about Tesla's energy, procurement opportunity? Of course, I've been refining it, adding new market analysis. And Garrett, do you remember explaining how I needed to modernize, catch up with technology?" My brother shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to be helpful." "You both were." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the Tesla folder, now thick with implementation schedules and progress reports. "The thing is, you were solving a problem that had already been solved." Austin leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Tesla and I signed a partnership agreement the same day you gave me your proposal. $23 billion over 10 years, primary energy supplier for their entire East Coast expansion." The room went silent, except for the hum of air conditioning and distant hydraulic equipment in the yard below. Garrett stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Austin's mouth opened, then closed. "That's impossible," Austin said finally. "Tesla's procurement process is incredibly competitive. You'd need massive infrastructure, proven capacity, which we have. Since about 15 years ago, we've been building relationships with grid operators and renewable energy manufacturers since before Tesla was selling cars to anyone except technology enthusiasts." Garrett found his voice. "You're telling me that while I was explaining why you needed a Tesla, you were actually supplying electricity for their factories?" "Not yet. The first deliveries start next month, but yes, essentially." Austin closed his laptop with a sharp snap. "Why didn't you tell me? I spent weeks researching opportunities you'd already secured." I thought about how to answer honestly. "Because you weren't asking if I knew about Tesla's energy needs. You were telling me how I could position myself to compete for their business. There's a difference. But I could have helped. Market analysis, strategic planning." "Austin," I leaned back in my chair, "what do you think I've been doing for the past 6 months? This wasn't about discovering an opportunity. It was about executing a plan." Through the window, I could see Tommy directing a crew installing a new electrical transformer. He'd been promoted to operations manager with a salary that reflected his critical role. In the distance, 3 Hartwell Energy trucks were returning from installation sites across the region. "Jesus Christ," Garrett said quietly. "How big is this contract?" "Big enough." "No, I mean, specifically, what kind of numbers? I pulled out my phone and showed them Tesla's stock price up 12% since morning trading began. In 35 minutes, Tesla's going to announce their East Coast Gigafactory. When they do, they'll also announce their primary energy supplier. Austin grabbed his phone and started searching for news updates. When did you know this was happening? I've known about the facility for 8 months. I've been working on the supply contract for 6. 8 months, Garrett rubbed his forehead. You knew when I was showing you my Tesla app explaining how the charging network was expanding. I knew. When I was telling you about modernizing your image, upgrading your truck. I knew then, too. Austin looked up from his phone. The day we had lunch at Romano's, when I was explaining Tesla's energy requirements. Your research was quite good, I said, just 6 months behind the implementation curve. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chen, 5 minutes until announcement. Hope you're ready. I typed back, ready. There's something else, I said, standing up and walking to the window. This Tesla contract isn't our only major agreement. We're also supplying backup power for 3 Amazon distribution centers, primary electricity for a semiconductor fabrication plant, and renewable energy for a data center complex. Garrett joined me at the window, staring down at the transformed facility. How much is your company worth now? More than it was 6 weeks ago. Eugene. His voice had changed, losing the patronizing tone I'd grown accustomed to. I owe you an apology. No, you don't. You were trying to help your brother succeed. The problem was assuming I hadn't already succeeded. Austin was scrolling through Tesla's website. Uncle Eugene, when Tesla makes this announcement, what happens to your company? We get very busy. I mean long-term, growth projections, market position. I smiled and checked my watch again. 2 minutes. Austin, would you like a job? What? We're going to need someone who understands strategic planning, market analysis, business development, someone who can think beyond today's problems to next year's opportunities. Are you serious? Dead serious. My phone lit up with a notification from Tesla's investor relations page. I opened the press release and read the headline aloud. Tesla announces East Coast Gigafactory partnership with Hartwell Energy Solutions. The room fell silent as Austin and Garrett absorbed seeing our company name in a Tesla press release. I scrolled down and found the quote where Elon Musk described Hartwell Energy as exactly the kind of innovative, environmentally conscious partner Tesla needs for sustainable expansion. Holy shit, Garrett whispered. Language, I said automatically, the same way I'd corrected him when we were kids. Austin was staring at his laptop screen, where Tesla's stock price had jumped another 8%. Uncle Eugene, I have so many questions. I'm sure you do. Starting with, when exactly did you become one of the most important energy suppliers on the East Coast? I walked back to my desk and pulled out the leather portfolio that had belonged to my father, now containing contracts worth more money than he'd ever imagined possible. Austin, let me tell you something about the energy business. It's not about making dramatic moves or chasing opportunities other people discover. It's about building relationships, proving reliability, and being ready when the world needs what you've been quietly preparing to provide. Garrett's phone started ringing, probably clients who'd seen the Tesla announcement and were connecting dots. He declined the call and looked at me with something that might have been respect. For what it's worth, he said, I think you should still consider upgrading your truck. I laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. Garrett, I've been thinking the same thing. Yeah? But not because I need to improve my image. I walked to the window and looked down at my Ford pickup, now surrounded by evidence of everything it had carried me through, because after 15 years of good service, it's earned retirement. Outside, another Hartwell Energy truck pulled into the lot, returning from a Tesla site survey. The driver waved up at the conference room window, and I waved back, the same wordless communication that had sustained this company through years of patient growth. Austin closed his laptop and looked at me with new eyes. Uncle Eugene, about that job offer. When do I start? In 6 hours, my phone would start ringing with calls from reporters and competitors who wanted to understand how a little energy company had secured the contract of the decade. But right now, I was standing with my brother and nephew, watching them realize that the person they'd been trying to help had been quietly building the future. They were just learning to see.